Hey guys, what's up? It's Charlie here, and today we're going to be looking at what will prisons be like in 2119. Here in 2019, we know prisons ain't exactly the best place to be. But what about in 100 years? What will prisons look like? It's a crazy fact that 1 in 40 US adults are under some form of correctional supervision. But what is the future of incarceration, or e-carceration? Will we be sent to a different planet, or maybe frozen in time? Let's find out. But if you don't want to go to prison, then I suggest you subscribe and press the notification bell too. It's no secret that punishment has moved on. 100 years ago, minor things like stealing a loaf of bread could have meant your life was over. And I don't mean in a swift and painless fashion. In fact, there were many torturing devices that were used routinely 100 years ago. Also, in some places like the Soviet Union, they would use things like work camps for prisoners. This is where prisoners were effectively worked until they passed away. They had to do hard and dangerous labor like coal mining every day for no money. But today things are very different. 102 countries have abolished capital punishment. 6 have done so for all offences except under special circumstances, and right now only 21 countries actually have the death penalty. The main ones being Saudi Arabia, USA, Iran, Vietnam, Egypt, and North Korea. And we all know that the prison system is not exactly the best. Many critics of this system say it only makes criminals commit more crime. After all, the best place for a petty criminal to learn criminal techniques is when they're surrounded by criminals. In the USA, the rate of convicts reoffending after they're out of prison is 76%. And some critics also say that many prisoners are actually mentally ill. They say they should instead get therapy and treatment in hospitals, not be put in a cage. Some countries have recently tried out what's known around the world as luxury prisons. For example, Norway has something called a Humane prison. The prison cells are better than many student dorms and kind of look like an ordinary apartment. In some Norwegian prisons, prisoners can even come and go when they please. They can't mix with the general public, but they can go out in the woods and areas around the prison. They also have clinical psychologists in the prison, and areas where people can get creative, for example art and music studios. You may be thinking, Charlie, surely treating criminals so well is not a good thing. After all, won't that encourage crime? Well, that's what I thought too, until I saw the reoffender numbers. The reoffending rate in Norway is only 20%, much better than the USA's 76%. So maybe other countries should adopt Norway's prison system. But now let's go into the future and look at what prisons will be like then. If we learn from history, we can see that prisons have got more and more humane. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this trend will continue. Punishment will be more humane. In 2019, there are already companies known as e-carceration companies. One company actually makes electric monitors which shocks inmates if they leave their houses. It tracks their every movement and it means they can only go outside when they're allowed to. Some say it's actually nicer for prisoners to stay inside their own homes. This way they won't fall into more crime or join a gang in prison. But some say for prisoners who are homebodies, this actually won't make any difference. So instead, let's look into the far future 100 years later. Many experts say that in 100 years, prisoners could be cryogenically frozen. This is where people pass away and are then frozen. Then, when the technology becomes available, they may be able to be unfrozen and reanimated. You may think that sounds like science fiction, but cryogenic freezing actually already exists. However, this only works on people who are no longer alive. You can't do it if you're already living. It's a popular myth that Walt Disney is cryogenically frozen. He actually isn't, but according to The Guardian, 300 people in the world are. Most of these people are in the USA and Russia. There are 2 problems with doing this right now. Firstly, there's the cost. In the USA, just to be frozen costs you $24,000. And that's with no upkeep at all, that's just the cost of you being frozen. In Russia, you can get it done slightly cheaper for $12,000. But it would still be very expensive to do it to every single inmate. And another issue right now is that you need to be dead to be cryogenically frozen. But in 100 years, I'm sure you won't need to be, as this technology is adapting and changing so fast. Many say that cryogenically freezing prisoners is much more humane. If the main reason of prisons is to get dangerous people away from the general public, surely this makes sense. They wouldn't have to waste their entire lives behind bars, but they would be taken away from humanity for a long time. And they would still be punished, as all of their family would continue to age, but they wouldn't be. The only problem with this I can see is someone trying to live forever. Maybe some people would keep committing crimes in order to never die. Some also say this actually may be more cost effective than the prisons we have today. The prisons we have today are very, very expensive. You need to pay the wages of all of the guards, all of the food for the prisoners, and sometimes even medical care. But if people were cryogenically frozen, you wouldn't need to pay for any of that stuff, just the machines. But if we can't cryogenically freeze prisoners in 100 years, what else could be done? Well, the clue is it's big, orange, and up in the sky. I am, of course, talking about Mars. We all know that Elon Musk and SpaceX have been sending rockets to Mars. Musk says by 2028 we'll be able to have humanity on Mars. Now, he doesn't mean a regular town like you and I live in, he means astronauts could go there for some amount of time. But remember, that's in 2028. What about in 2119? Many say that we could make Mars into a prison colony. This is an idea similar to Australia. Australia used to be a penal colony. People who committed crimes in Britain would be sent to this island and would live on there. Many say that in the future we should do the same thing with Mars. But that would rely on space travel becoming much less expensive in the future. Right now it would cost millions to send one person there. And seeing as there's 2.2 million people currently in prison in the USA, it would cost 22 trillion to send everyone there. That's around the USA's GDP for an entire year. But if the cost of space travel significantly reduces, maybe prisoners will all be kept on Mars. Mars is already a dangerous planet, so I guess it makes sense. But many say this would actually be going backwards, as it would not be more humane. The conditions in Mars are likely going to be much worse than on Earth even in 100 years' time. But even so, incarceration, cryogenic freezing, and Mars prisons may be the future of prisons. But now it's time to make your voice heard. Do you think all of these modern prisons will be good or bad? Click on the poll in the top right corner and let me know. If you want some more amazing videos, then check out my second channel. There'll be a link to that on screen in a moment, and I'm nearly on 100k. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now, leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.